Hi Prakash, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Bala. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Prakash, you have had a long career in cricket commentary and also have managed a very successful corporate life. Walk me through your childhood. I see that you come from a family of army officers. So tell me a little bit about um, how the passion for cricket came to you.
Well, I think two completely unrelated areas, really. The family I was born into, and I'll talk about that in a moment, and the passion for cricket. I don't think have anything to do with each other. Passion for cricket, I think, is what we call it, or I like to call it, blood group C, which is you just have it. And I think so many millions of Indians, or South Asians in particular, have that love for cricket, and I was no exception as a child. Um, on the family side, yes, three generations now and counting uh, in the army, all in the same regiment, all in the same arm. I guess I was the one who missed out. Um, there's a little anecdote around it. I remember as a young kid, I once said to my father, I said, I want to join the army, but I want to start at a brigadier. And, and I think that was the end of my army aspiration because that put me in my place and said those things, like many others in life, have to be earned. And on a more serious level, my elder brother was in the army, or he retired now, of course. And that's how I didn't make it into the army. But my grandfather on my mother's side, my elder brother, both his sons, and we are hoping that one of their children as well will stay. So there'll be a Wakankar in the army for as long as we would like to believe, but we'll wait and watch.
So, did anybody in the family love cricket? It's usually one of the,
To be honest with you, I think a passing interest in cricket is what I would describe it as. My father came from a very humble background. In fact, he had what was then called a Queen's Commission in the then British Indian Army after hearing a speech in his hometown in Sangli by uh, Mr. Savarkar. He was inspired to join the army, and he went and got a Queen's Commission, which means you join as a sepoy in the then British Army along with another friend of his. And he then went on, of course, to not only retire as a very senior brigadier, but also had a successful stint in the corporate world later. But the reason I mention that is because I don't think there was a time, at least in my father's life, where you had the luxury of enjoying cricket or sport. I don't think it would have been very different for many people from that generation. They were people who were out there to make a living. They were out there to look after their families. Dad had an extended family, and so there was obviously very little time. My brother was a national rower and a basketball player. Sorry, baseball player or softball as they call it in India, but not cricket. So cricket was me, and it just came. I don't know where. My earliest memories are of playing cricket with either neighbors or in the cantonment with school kids or whatever. And it's difficult for me to tell you where it comes from. It just can't. It just was there. I was born with it, I suppose. The love for the
yeah.
game.
Yeah, coincidentally, you're the second guest on the podcast from Sangli. I've had the pleasure of talking to Indranil Chitle of the Chitle Bandhu
Ah, of course,
Mithai
of
Wale.
course. Yes, yes. Good man, good family, great contributors to Maharashtra and Indian economy, and wonderful stories of the Chitales from my father as well. My eldest uncle actually worked with them in Pune.
Yeah, it's remarkable how they were into dairy farming and then they lost all the cows and then literally started from scratch. Yeah. Uh, so Prakash, do you did you actually see a transformation in how Indians looked at cricket after the 1983 World Cup? Because I believe that your commentary career started soon after.
Yes, again, very good question, but very little to do with each other. first to your question of transformation of whether Indians looked at it differently. I think they certainly did because, at a stage in 83, when I was just getting into my 20s, um, India as a nation, Indians as people, in my opinion, were still finding their place in the world. And I think I sort of link that to the famous film Fires of Babylon about West Indies cricket. And in that film or the documentary, Clive Lloyd, I think, says somewhere that for the people in the UK, for the colored people particularly, the West Indies doing well in the UK was like redemption, was like them standing up and being proud of being black, being proud of being from the Caribbean. I don't think 1983 was very different for India and Indians, particularly from a cricketing and a sporting perspective. We used to have, we used to be happy if Vijay Amritraj or Ramanathan Krishnan sort of made it to the semi-final or the quarter-final of a Grand Slam and would say, wow, what a player. Then came Prakash Padukone. I mean, other than Michael Ferreira, who I think dominated billiards and snooker for a while, there really was no unquestioned world beater. And I think that is the context in which 83 was so vital, so important. I dare say that those that loved cricket followed cricket with an equal passion even earlier. I mean, I remember waking up 8 or 9 years old. Dad used to have an old, what do they call it, a valve radio. And, tuning into the Caribbean late at night to listen to the voices of people like Tony Cozier, just to follow what was going on. Because the only other way to know would have been to wait for a full 36 hours for the newspapers to report. And so I feel that I'd put it this way: 83 added a completely new dimension to the way Indians looked at cricket. Not necessarily increased the love for it. I think increased the passion for it, because they believed we could beat. I remember India just before the 83 World Cup winning their first ever ODI against the West Indies in the Caribbean. Baroda Oval, if I remember correctly. And my God, I mean, that was a topic of discussion in every school, college, and university. So, yeah, 83 was vital.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I mean, if anyone listening to this podcast gets to watch some footages of England versus West Indies from the 80s or the 70s, it's remarkable the ratio of the crowd, black versus white. The stands were full and people were so passionate about the game back in the day. Now, Prakash, coming back to your career as a broadcaster, I know that you played Maharashtra U-22, and you were, pretty much in the reckoning for probably the state selection or as a Ranji player. How did you pivot to being a commentator?
I've answered this question a few times, and it's actually now very well rehearsed in my head as well. And it is the reality. Look, as I said, I come from a family. My dad was an army officer, as I've said earlier. Sport or playing sport was not for the faint-hearted from a career perspective. Those days, either you got employed by the airlines or the railways or a bank. Very few who were really, really good, and mainly from the Mumbai area. There were a few companies in Madras, a few companies in Bombay, as it was, both were called then, who would employ and had teams in the local Time Shield in Mumbai, for example. And so when the time came for the 12th standard exams clashing with a All India under 22, I think, or under 19, I forget, a preparatory camp for selection to what might have been potentially the India schoolboys, as they were called. Many of my friends chose to go to the camp. And I, for one, I think that was the turning point. I made a call that I would appear for my 12th standard exams. I didn't have the luxury of missing a year. What is it that you guys call it now? Gap year or whatever it's called.
Drop year, gap year,
Drop
yeah.
year, gap year. Those words didn't exist in the lexicon for me at the time, or for anyone, most of them. So I went on to do my appear for my exams, and I think that is where uh, both the realization that I may not necessarily have been as good as some of my friends who went on to play for India. Many of them actually did from that group, particularly, and the realization that I was at peace with myself to say, yes, I mean, I will find a way of staying in touch with cricket. And I continued to play cricket, whether it was club cricket, whether it was in Singapore for the SCC, as to open the batting, top the averages a couple of years when I was working there. So cricket remained very much part of my life. But broadcasting came about as a result of cricket in Pune. And, Bal Pandit was a very, very respected senior broadcaster in the local language, in Marathi and English. And it was he who, during rain breaks in coaching classes at what was then called, or still called, the Nehru Stadium in Pune, would say to me, close your eyes, picture a game of cricket and talk about it. And this is often what I try and tell any youngster who asks me if they feel that they want to make a career in broadcasting. And I say, look, your mind has to become the eye. And then, as John Allert very famously put it, you've got to make the listener feel the breeze on his cheek when he's listening to the commentary through his transistor set. And I think that's where it all began, really, from a broadcasting perspective. And it was a perfect way to stay in touch with a game that I absolutely, absolutely love. So that's where broadcasting, in a way, began.
Hmm. Is that one of the things that you still try to do, is to narrate a story? And I've heard you say this famously, that you love radio commentary far more than television commentary, that it gives you that space and the bandwidth to narrate a story.
Yes, I mean, look, again, honestly, a little bit of it may be sour grapes because I really haven't got too much of an opportunity on television. It seems to be the domain of people who've represented their countries nationally, internationally. Though I must add in very quickly, in defense of my good friend Harsha, particularly, and I don't see any particular reason why that is so. Maybe they are just more sellable assets, and so channels have them, which is okay. But leaving the sour grapes story or aspect aside, it is the absolute truth, Bala. You, all your senses are in play in radio commentary. I'm not suggesting you can't do that in television, but you got to talk back to your producer. He or she must agree. Those images must come up, and then you can talk about it. But the free flow that radio gives you, radio is a free form art form. Television broadcasting or television sports commentary in cricket in particular, I think is within a canvas. Yes, it's getting much wider. The number of cameras, the number of other things going on. I think it's slowly inching its way into that realm of greater flexibility, greater freedom. But inherently, radio is magic.
Yeah, and I think I can draw similar parallels between like a television interview or a short form interview versus a podcast, because there are no limits in podcasts, and you can just dive deep and double click on as many aspects as you would like. So uh, uh, is there a story behind, like, why you never made it to television commentary? Was there an opportunity that you uh, because I mean, I see a lot of similarities between your career and Harsha's career, and in the sense that
Oh, you can't really compare. I mean, Harsha in so many different ways um, chose a path. Maybe to a certain extent, our academic backgrounds are similar,
yeah.
but beyond that, Harsha chose a path of broadcasting, and his early years. I don't want to let out any secrets, but they clearly weren't easy. He used to do a lot of radio, of course, because that was the only avenue at that time, really. And then he has held his own like an individual, almost, I'm not saying battling, but he's held his own against people who, for right or wrong reasons, people believe have far more knowledge, and they do. There's no question. I mean, if you played the game at the highest level, you will have certain nuances that you've experienced, which maybe someone who hasn't need not necessarily have. But that being said, you're also constrained by what you've done. And you are who you are. Your record books are what they are. For someone who's not had those constraints, I think there is a compensatory freedom and flexibility. So I doff my hat to Harsha. I mean, what he has achieved is exceptional, and long may it continue, because he's a fine individual, and that I think comes through in his voice, in his way of description, and the way he talks about various things. And look, the world today is, I think, almost has a contempt for the familiar. So there is increasingly this thing, right? And that's again something that television does a lot with, is you rotate commentators a lot. You have three people now describing a cricket match. There was days when we used to have one, and two became a bit of a luxury at times. But that's just the way the industry goes. It's become so much more commercial now. Everything has to fall into place. So no similarities. I am nobody. I don't think I'm anybody in comparison to Harsha personally. I'm very happy with what I have been able to do and achieve, and so yeah, more power to him, and may he long continue to regale his fans.
Yeah, I think contempt to familiarity is so true, because with the advent of online media, more and more actors even are getting exposed with through interviews and through other means, and then when they play a part in a movie, I personally do feel a sense of disconnect, because you see them so many times out in the open, and you're like, oh, is this the same person? I don't know if it happens with everybody, but for me it certainly does. Yeah.
I hear you.
So and to your point about experienced cricketers coming into commentary, and probably the struggles that Harsha might have faced, I happened to listen to a fantastic episode by Amit Verma with Vikram Sathe on the struggles that he faced when he had gone to South Africa, and how much he was unwelcome as a commentator or as a
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? Sometimes it's tough. Vikram is again an extremely talented person, a very dear friend as well. I have a lot of time for Vikram, but that's the way the world is. And why should it be different? It's been like that essentially for centuries. So there's no reason why it should change. Which is where I think God has been extremely kind to me. That cricket broadcasting, cricket association with cricket was never my bread and butter. I didn't have to live off it. And maybe it's very rare to have that happen. And I consider myself truly blessed. Someone's up there is looking after me, because had it been that way, maybe I would have been the same as some of the others who would have wanted to protect their turf all the time, make sure nobody's encroaching on it, and so on and so forth. And you can understand that in a warped sort of a way. You can understand.
Yeah. And over time, you have managed different careers, both at Mahindra and Coca-Cola and many other companies. How did you wear so many hats? Because I remember back in the day when I was listening to radio commentary, you and Ashish and Vineet, you guys were regulars. And how did you manage a full-time corporate job, that too at a very top position, and cricket commentary?
Well, firstly, I wasn't at the top all the time. So the earlier years were much easier. But I see where you're coming from. See, the reality is I've used almost, I dare say, 90% of my annual leave over a 35, 38-year career for cricket commentary. Particularly in the good old days when Prasar Bharati Akashvani was still in a position where they would send people to venue to do commentary and not box you into a studio and have you talk over a television screen. Um, it took support. It took support from family first of all. So my wife and daughter have a huge role to play. It took support from the organization that one worked for, and it took support from your immediate boss. And I have again been very fortunate. I think, except for one individual, who obviously I won't name, in my career. No one else in the corporate world has ever stood in my way. And I think as was one got sort of more hierarchically senior in the organization, responsibilities grew. I would balance them. I mean, I would typically on a test match day in whichever part of the world and depending on the time zone, I would probably end up with a 14, 18-hour day because I would do my emails, I'd do my calls. Yes, some of my colleagues probably suffered a little bit because I had to call them at odd hours, either very early or very late. But as long as you are delivering on your responsibilities on both sides, behind the microphone and in your corporate role, honestly, I don't think anybody should or will have a problem.
Hmm. That is fantastic. So Prakash, you did stints with the BBC Test Match Special and also ABC. How was that experience like? Because different country, completely different panel of broadcasters. How welcome did you feel, especially in Australia? Because I have listened to commentary pieces between people like Kerry O'Keefe and Harsha, and a lot of these Australian words and the jokes are I don't get it sometimes. So
Yeah,
was it difficult?
look, Australian slang is slightly different. I must confess, I have actually never broadcast on ABC in Australia. Okay. Fingers crossed. I hope I will be able to do that in this forthcoming series at the end of the year, but we'll wait and see what happens. I have done, I think, 2, maybe 3 test series for ABC in India, albeit obviously with Australian colleagues. And I've never had a problem. I've never had a problem. Because I think both with the BBC and the BBC in particular, and ABC, very, very welcome. Because I think they respect one fundamental thing, that because of your background, upbringing, and where you come from, you bring something unique to a broadcast that they don't necessarily have. And that is the key. Like everything else in life, Bala, if you are willing to give respect, chances are you're going to get respect. And when two respectful people have a conversation, I think it has the potential to be remarkable. Whereas if one is sort of looking down on the other for whatever reasons, there can be a less than optimal solution. I have certainly not firsthand experienced it ever. There have been maybe a couple of sort of possibilities, but they always stayed in possibilities. I've never really pushed that envelope because both the producers at the BBC, Adam Mountford, and the Australian colleagues who've come through, whether it was the first time or the second time, the producers there and the folks at ABC, exceptionally helpful. Just as in the earlier years, Akashvani was. And I always say, my alma mater is All India Radio. Had it not been for All India Radio, I would be nowhere. And then there's another little organization for a bit that I did some work with a friend of mine called Ajay Sethi, Cricket Radio. That was, again, an exceptional endeavor. And again, very supportive, very helpful. So people have been kind.
Yeah. It's remarkable how little pieces of your commentary are still uploaded on YouTube, and they get like 40K, 50K views.
You got to tell me where they are because I've never found them.
Just type Prakash Wakankar, Ashish. Yeah. There's this particular gentleman, I forget his name, but I can message you later. Uploads pieces of commentary from, I don't know, the 2018 series where India went to South Africa, and I think from the 2005 series, etc.
Remarkable.
Yeah, it's crazy.
No, some people are they put you to shame with their sheer love, determination, and passion, and it is actually a pity. I remember I have that particular mail I've preserved. I hope one day I'll be able to meet this gentleman. I think his name is Pervez from the Kashmir Valley. He says that he now works in a particular organization at a reasonably good role. And he says, I consider you my English guru. because I learned English listening to your cricket commentary. I mean, it is so humbling, Bala. It is hugely humbling that, doing something that you love to do could positively influence somebody else. It's fantastic.
That is so true. I mean, in my interview with Jared Kimber, I mentioned to him how I worked on my English for my GRE through Cricinfo. So what I would
Really?
do, yeah. So
Wow.
what I would do is, if I have to, uh, get to know of a word. I don't know. Let's just say emaciator or something, and then I would just type that word and then type the website's name, Cricinfo, and I would just read an article that would
Mm.
contain the word,
Include the word, yeah.
so that when the word comes up, then I would be reminded of that article or that particular match, and that actually helped me a lot. I just kind of figured my
Wow.
way out it.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. You talk about this aspect, and there's a very interesting piece. In my school, Dhyana Prabodhini in Pune, which I went to after dad retired, there used to be something called the Radiant Reader series back in the day. And I'm talking ages now, late 70s. The school had actually phonetically got the entire book printed in Devanagari. As a result, the classical Maharashtrian pronunciations of going from 1 to 5, where 4 and 5 would typically be, for an average Maharashtrian, even today, I think would be 4 and 5, right? It was always 4 and 5 because we read it as 4 and 5. And I recall, I won't name the gentleman, but you'll figure it out. Somebody who was very involved with the education mission at one time in a different political dispensation. I actually made this presentation to that gentleman and said, if only we could do that with all our vernacular, right? A South Indian or a Tamilian is never going to say yem and yan because he's going to read it in his script the way it needs to be read. Same with Gujarat, same with Bengal, same with everywhere else. I guess it just got consigned to the waste bin somewhere along the way. But I still think it's a very, very doable idea. Now there's even better techniques to do it. Because I think, while different accents and different ways of speaking the English language adds to its charm. I mean, you listen to a Yorkshireman and an Irishman, you wonder what language they're talking sometimes. And while taking nothing away from that, for people who use it as a profession, I think there is a case to be made to be closer to if there is anything called the correct way of speaking English, and this can make a big difference.
Yeah, that is so true. I mean, I look at some of the articles published in Malayalam papers, and Malayalam is a pretty flexible language. You could pretty
Yes,
much
very
write
Sanskrit based. Yeah.
yeah, you could pretty much write anything that you write in English in the Malayalam script, but still they mess it up, and I still can't figure out why. Yeah.
Maybe there's something there for the entrepreneur to be in you. Who knows? Who knows?
We'll see. Um, so, Prakash, we were talking about how you were touched by an email from someone in the Kashmir Valley. Any interesting fan experiences from back in the day? Because it was so hard to reach. Like, I remember listening to radio commentary. I would wonder how people whose voices I'm hearing over the radio looked like. What they would do. There was no internet and there was no way
No.
to reach. Did people still reach out to you and share how much they
I
loved
have
it?
had, again, this sounds a bit bombastic, but it's very true. I have had the most amazing experiences in two places. The back of taxis, cabs, and the corner pan bidi shop. You talk to them, and there have been a few instances where a cabbie will not take money from me. He will ask me hesitatingly, "आप radio पे बात करते हैं? Do you speak on radio?" And then when you say yes, then he says, "You talk about cricket. You do commentary on Akashvan." I said, "Yes." So once or twice they've refused to take money, which was very, very embarrassing. One time I remember in Calcutta, a cabbie actually asked me if he could drive me home. He took me to his home only to sign an autograph for his little girl. But this has also happened on a train station in the UK, where I missed a train or the train was cancelled or something, and I had to get the ticket changed. And the gentleman there asked me, Do you do work for TMS? And I said, yes, I do. And he said, may I have a selfie before I change your ticket? I mean, these are, I hate calling them fan moments because sometimes it sort of demeans people who love your work. But they are truly humbling, and they are gifts that one will treasure till one's last day.
Fantastic. I also wanted to touch upon how your relationship has been with longtime reporters like, let's say, a Sunandan Lele, or the new reporters like an Adam Collins or a Bharat Sundareshan. Any interesting?
Oh Lord, see, so Sunandan was a year junior to me in school and college. We went to the same school, same college. We played together for Maharashtra. In fact, if memory serves me right, the record for the second wicket partnership in the intercollegiate tournament in Pune still stands in Sunandan in my name. So Nandu and I go back a long way, and I have humongous admiration for it. Sunandan is a beacon in terms of what he's achieved. Adam, I feel that he could run a small city on his energy. Yeah,
That's true.
he is a powerhouse of energy. If there was a way to plug in gadgets, I think they'd run uninterrupted. He's amazing. Bharat, I've known both before he became Aussie and after he's become Aussie, and he's just such a diverse set of interests, yet the ability to assimilate. It couldn't have been easy for him in Australia, but he's become very much one of them, and they've adopted him, I think, as if he's one of their own. And I think there's huge amount of credit to be given to people like them for keeping journalistic traditions alive, especially Bharat, in an era where I think the written word hasn't quite been able to get translated into the modern, what should I say, the modern avatar that it needs to. And Bharat is a standout example, exception to that rule, because he does it so well.
Yeah. I follow their content quite a bit. And there are some other, like, sort of quirky podcasters like The Great Cricketer. I don't know if you have had a chance to check them out. They are these Aussie duo who makes a lot of comedy with.
Heard of them, but I haven't had a chance.
It's pretty interesting. Uh, Prakash, over time, I've heard Ian Bishop say this quite a bit, that, after the whole Carlos Brathwaite, remember the name line, there is a constant pressure to deliver iconic lines sort of time and again. Did you ever feel that pressure of, somehow just not having anything different to say? I would say something similar to a writer's block.
No, never. Again, for the simple reason, and this is going to sound a little bit philosophical, and I've said this before. To me, anybody who has read or has even heard a little bit about the Mahabharata, Sanjay, who was narrating the whole story to his blind king, to me was the first commentator that I can think of. And therefore, a commentator or broadcaster's job in the role of not a summarizer or an expert then is simply to describe what he or she is seeing on the field, in this case, the field of cricket, to the best of his or her ability. Right? And when you approach it that way, where is the pressure to have a quotable quote? I mean, the fact that there is a famous line, I think it was Brian Johnston said, the bowler's holding the batsman's willy, right, is an exception which occurred in the normal course of commentary. I don't think Brian Johnston wrote it down and thought about how funny it would be and then said it. It just happened that the bowler actually was holding and the batsman actually was willing. Right? Or, I forget who it was, but someone saying the England captain Ray Illingworth has just relieved himself at the northern end of the ground. I mean, these are wonderful little lines, and everyone can laugh about them and have a joke, but they came in the course of natural broadcasting. And therefore, I don't think you should be under that pressure. You mentioned Ian Bishop, who I respect immensely. I don't know the gentleman that well, but one day I hope I will be able to. Um, and if indeed that is the case, that players and broadcasters and others are under pressure to deliver these quotable quotes, it's almost unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's probably something to do with the difference between radio commentary and television commentary, where I've heard a few people say that radio commentary is a little more easier, and I don't mean it in a different way, but in the sense that you're just describing what's going on in the field, whereas in television commentary the viewer is already watching what is going on, and then the commentary is sort of an add-on, so to speak. So
Yeah, that might be a helpful advice for some who speak on television.
very, very well said. Prakash, I wanted to talk to you about the 90s era of Indian cricket. I grew up in the 90s, and I remember watching cricket to be extremely painful. I did not watch a lot of test matches. The Indian team wasn't performing as good as a lot of the other teams. We used to lose games in Sharjah all the time. Uh, it was pretty painful, and things changed after Saurav Ganguly took over. Um, Watching Indian cricket during the 90s from a distance, did you notice that something was wrong, or what was it about the 90s team that just did not work well? Was it the selection? What was it?
It's difficult to say because, to be honest, that was also the period when I was farthest from India. I worked overseas from 90 to 98 during this time, largely in Southeast Asia. So I stayed in touch with the game. Still would come back and do the odd game of commentary, but I wasn't as involved or as closely followed. I didn't follow it as close. However, when you're in love with the game and you romanticize it so much, the belief that there could be anything other than performance or ability affecting results never even crossed my mind. I have had so many of my friends and people I know saying to me, "Oh, we stopped. We stopped after all that match fixing stuff and all that. We just stopped watching. We gave up on it." And I said, "Then you were never really lovers of the game." Because yes, you will get the rotten apple, you will get the bad incident, you will get the wrong influence. That doesn't mean you give up your passion or your romance. So for me, I would like to believe, and maybe it's a naive way of looking at it, limited options domestically, big city domination of national cricket, and other teams just playing better. And look, the number of chances and opportunities we used to get internationally were also limited. Remember that there have been, I think, if memory serves me right, 8 or 9 years have passed between two tours of Australia.
Yeah, India 92 and 99. Yeah.
So think about it. Now they are lining up for the first time after the Ashes and the Windies to play 5 tests against India. I won't name the commentator, someone very famous and someone I know well, once said, "I wouldn't tour India with my dog." Today, that gentleman laps up all the love and affection and the dollars that he gets. So the world changes, people change, times change. And Indian cricket has to be, in my view, careful of the fact that by being the monetary and economic powerhouse, they exercise their influence responsibly, not to please others, but not necessarily to serve a single end either. Yeah. I remain hopeful that will continue or happen.
Yeah, that's excellently said. You mentioned about limited options in the 90s. Did you ever get a chance to talk to like a Rajinder Goel or like an Amol Mazumdar who were doing exceptionally well in the domestic circuit, but just could not make it?
Not Rajinder Goel, but probably someone as if not equally gifted, Paddy Shivalkar. I mean, these were people who I wouldn't have been able to go and talk to because for me they were way up there. Amol Mazumdar, I watched him a lot. I don't know him very well, but I've had a couple of conversations with him. But again, closer to home, Milind Gunjal, Srikant Kalyani, Raju Bhalekar, and a few others, but certainly these three, all deserve to play for India. Had they been Mumbai boys, they would have. Had they been probably Delhi or Madras guys, maybe they would. And so, yes, frustrations for some of these people will only come out if they ever choose to talk about them. And Raju, God bless him, is passed on. But Milind, I think it has to rankle because he was so good. Srikant Kalyani, I mean, he even went to Bengal to play Ranji Trophy for them in the hope. And look, a sports person's career and his or her form, it peaks at a particular time. That's when you got to get the break. Right? So when somebody says Rinku Singh will get his opportunity, I do hope that he's still in cracking form at the time that opportunity comes along. Otherwise, we might miss out on that.
Yeah, what do you have to say about the current World Cup team? I mean, you mentioned about Rinku Singh. I think that was I think, quite a miss because.
Well, to be honest with you, Bala, even though I mentioned that as an example, first of all, after the Prime Minister job, I think the chairman of selectors of the Indian cricket team is probably the second hardest job in the world, in the country at least, because you just can't please everyone. That's point number one. And using a corporate approach to it, just in terms of analyzing it, what is your strategic intent? If your strategic intent is largely to go with tested, experienced hands who also are doing decent, if not great, T20 work, then this is probably the best team you could have picked. Are you going to be Australian Cricket Board and leave out a Steve Smith? Are you going to be them again and say, sorry, Pat, you're not leading this team? Then we might have had a different team if that was the strategic intent. Because there are a certain number of players who probably on just IPL form would not have made it. And yet there are some on IPL form who should have made it. So therefore, you don't necessarily have a team selection which is following one single criteria. It can never have. I think the captain, the coach, would have sat down with Ajit Agarkar and the rest of the guys and picked what they felt was going to be the best set of options in a limited number of 15 to take to a completely untested American cricketing environment, and then the pitches in the Caribbean, which probably will be a little bit on the slower side. So I would have loved it. I mean, I would have loved a 2007 type of team repeat to say, okay, anybody, almost like saying, and I'm saying this facetiously, almost like saying, okay, anyone who's played more than X number of games, not considered for selection, right? Yeah. And you take the Shashanks of the world and let them, blossom or blow up. Who cares? But now what is riding on T20 tournaments and World Cups is so much more than it rode on in 2007. 2007, I think it was the senior players who said, listen, we don't want to embarrass ourselves properly. Go. And, history happened.
Yeah, I feel like the same thing happened in 83 where, a bunch of people, a lot of them under 25 just went, exuberance of youth probably showed. But I think now a lot is riding on that ICC trophy. And what do you think is the reason? Do you think IPL is the reason? What do you think? Or we just have had too many bad days?
Your guess is as good as mine. Look, the former coach of the Indian cricket team, someone I know well. Again, I go back to strategic intent. I sometimes feel, and I'm not saying I know this for any fact, and certainly the coach has never told me this. I just feel that the strategic intent was to say, we want to be world beaters in test match cricket. And somewhere the focus was almost there, a lot more than it was on the white ball game. And certainly our test match performance has improved immensely. Yeah. Right? Now, I think we were caught out on a bad day or a bad set of 5, 6 days in the first WTC final. There was no reason for us not to win that. I think we would have. We were a better side than New Zealand. Can't say the same about losing to Australia at the Oval. I think there we were outplayed, let's be honest. But I think it was that focus which probably corrected one side of it and maybe did not drive the same. I wouldn't want to be one of these all-format cricketers today. Think about it. You'd be like that taxi which gets driven from Bombay to Pune 3 times a day, right? 360 days a year, probably. How much can it take? I mean, I'm amazed sometimes at the fitness, the caliber, the mental strength of so many of these cricketers who play, particularly the ones who play all 3 formats. And for them to, where do they get the energy from? They must be meeting Adam Collins every now and then to get the energy.
Yeah, but do you think that is the future? Like, separate teams, separate captains.
I don't know.
Yeah.
To be honest, Bala, I don't know. I'm not. I can't say that I have studied these aspects that closely. Only one thing I know: a good sportsman or sportswoman knows what her or his body can take. And if superior, consistent performance is to be the criteria, then they know when it's time not to do something. What has vitiated the waters is everything else that's around it. The visibility, the glamour, the money, the endorsements, and all of that. And then the only fallback one can use is to say, look, a sportsman's career is very limited. So who can and why should anybody grudge them the opportunity of making hay quite literally while the sun shines? And those two are inherently contradictory somewhere. I remember many years ago, Kapil Dev once at I think it was a lecture or talk in Mumbai, saying that if we want Test cricket to be the pinnacle and an average bowler on a Test match day bowls 25 overs, then we've got to find a way of getting that person value equal to or higher than what a guy bowling 4 overs in a T20 game gets. Because the currency of the day is moolah, money. Right? As Mr. Gavaskar often says, without demeaning it, the crest on your shirt meant everything at a given time. Today, that does mean something, but I suspect that it's also inherently a means to an end. Whereas in the days gone by, that was the end. It was the pinnacle. Right? And there's that great story, which is public knowledge in his book, where he says that I think it was the blazer, Madhav Mantri, his mama's blazer, or cap, I think it was, that he wore. And he got a right royal bollocking to say, you don't wear that thing. You earn that thing. And only after you earn it do you have the right to wear it. I remember one time Sunny was on air. I wasn't there. I was watching on television. And I think it was Munaf Patel in South Africa who was sitting on a grass bank with a couple of other people, I think. And he, knowingly or unknowingly, I think was sitting on the India cap with the logo on it. And Gavaskar lit it. And rightly so, in my opinion. Because again, maybe it's the army upbringing, maybe it's something else. There are some symbols which are inviolate. You cannot mess with those. But again, that is changing. Right? There are other countries whose flags get made into underwear, for Christ's sake. So it's okay to each their own. I don't think one size will ever fit all. And we just have to find ways of being tolerant.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think I somehow feel that I kind of respect Australians in this matter, how how the baggy green means so much to them, and they prioritize the country over, let's say, an IPL, or even the English team, right? uh, Prioritizes their country over club cricket. So I don't know, I wish.
Well, take that with a bucket of salt. Okay, take
Mhm.
that with a bucket of salt. Um, you have to realize that everything in life is relative,
Right.
right? So if there is an Australian or an English cricketer, or any other cricketer who he or she chooses to forego a lucrative IPL contract, first of all, we don't know what their board has offered them, if anything. Second, they are probably still among the elite of their country relative to many other people. So it's not as if they're struggling in life. And three, I suspect the vast majority of them know that when they finish playing, they're anyway going to come and sit behind a television microphone and make oodles of money. So where's the problem?
Yeah,
Just
well,
my theory. Just my
y-
theory.
yeah, could be. Well, Prakash, what an amazing conversation. I mean, I could I could go on forever, but before we end this podcast, I just have a very light-hearted question for you.
Mhm.
What is one extremely silly rule in cricket that you want to get rid of, or maybe a rule that you want to bring into
Oh,
cricket?
very, very simple. I do not want this umpires call business on DRS. I understand the rationale. I understand two dimensions, three dimensions. I suspect you're an engineer. You understand it probably better than I do.
Yeah, just margin of error, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it is. But I'm just saying, can you just make it black and white, right? Because I think the day is going to come when you're going to have a robo standing there in front, in place where we see umpires today, right? Just take it out, because that brings the needle back either to the television umpire, to the technology, or to the on-field umpire, right? I was very pleased when the lost review, retained review thing with umpires call came along. That was a good improvement. I certainly don't, I would love to say this is out, this is not out. Whatever it is, as long as the tech is applied the same way, and I suspect it is, so then where is the problem? Why show umpires call? You are either making the bowler feel very bad that I almost had the man, or you're making the batter feel very bad that I really wasn't out. Why do it?
Yeah.
Just take it away.
Yeah, sometimes with the DRS ball tracking, I've always felt that it's something's just not right. Not with every decision, but
You know,
sometimes.
Bala, human error is always acceptable.
Right.
I think people feel that machines are infallible. And the fact of the matter is, again, as a person working in that industry or that around that ecosystem, I'm sure that with all the AI stuff that's going on, it's only a question of time where we start seeing more and more errors there as well. Because if AI is learning from observation and all the other stuff around, it's bound to have that element in it as well. So, like Wimbledon, right? You have the line call, and you give it, I think, a couple of challenges per set or whatever to each player. Sometimes that challenge does get revoked. I believe, like they've done with the no ball in cricket now. Yes or no, you don't have to wait for the umpire. Sometimes a call is not reviewed, but you clearly see there's a nick. Step in and correct it, because the philosophical statement behind it is let let it be as correct as it can be. Then use tech wherever you can. That would be the only thing. If we could go back completely to human control, I would love it, because that was part of the romance. And once you brought in neutral umpires, at least institutionalized discrimination had been removed. Right? But
Right.
I guess that never happened, not in my lifetime.
I remember Ravi Shastri talk about the 1986 tight test match that I think it was Maninder Singh. He got a big inside edge, and
Yeah.
and Ravi Shastri spoke to the umpire after that, and he was like, you heard the nick, didn't you? And then the umpire was like, yeah, but then now we are all part of history. So
Well, there are
maybe.
many other things. There are many other things in that test match also, which we won't go into. So don't
Oh
worry.
man. Ah, I wonder what all I'll get to know if this wasn't getting recorded, but I would love to some.
Someday.
Anyway, thank you, Prakash. I mean, what a delight it has been. I mean, listening to you on radio, I always wondered, like I said during the show, uh, how they looked like, what they would be doing in life, etc., etc. But I never thought that I would be getting 1 hour to talk to you. So it's been an honor. It's been a privilege. Thank you
No,
so much.
pleasure is all mine, Bala. Look, just another crazy cricket fan. Probably got a little bit lucky. That's it.
Awesome. Wish you all the
Thank you.
best. Yeah.
Take care. Stay
Bye.
well. Bye
Bye.
bye.